instant access to all of our apps. It's simple. Let me show you how. From your home screen, find the plans and bundles icon in the lower left corner of your screen. Tap it to see your available plans and bundles. You can choose between a Prime bundle with data and talk or pick a plan from the Available Plans tab. Find the plan that's best for you. Then hit confirm and you're ready to go. With your new plan, you may have access to more of our apps. Find them in the More from Digicel section and hit download for each of our new apps. You can also upgrade your current plan or bundle under the Active Plans section of your homepage. Excited to try it out? Download the My Digicel app today. My Digicel, better together.
Drive for free, talk for free with Hyrule. You can win it all.
That's right. Free beer, free rent, free utilities, groceries, and fuel.
Check the bar for your 3 for 10. Look under your crown and win. Everything is rent, free. Utilities, groceries, fuel. You can win it all. Yeah.
Enjoy Ice Cold Hyrule 3 for 10 and check under the crown for the Live Up stamp and win a $200 cash voucher instantly.
Hyrule, you can win. Everything is free.
There's over $100,000 in prizes to be won. Rise up S3G and win with Hyrule. Terms and conditions apply. Promotion ends August 15th. Must be 18 and older. Please drink responsibly.
On August 12th, 2021, all over the world, youths were celebrated as that day was marked International Youth Day. This day was set aside to raise awareness to the importance of youth engagement and to highlight the actions of young people and the issues that we face. Today, we will discuss how celebrated young people are in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and how welcomed they are to the political arena. With me are some of our young intellectuals, professionals, and possibly aspiring politicians. And of course, before we jump in, I'm going to let them introduce themselves to you. And I'm going to start with the young man on my right, Jamali John.
Let me start by saying thank you very much for having me on the program again. It's my second time being on the program. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to share some time with you. And good afternoon to all the listeners, whether here in St. Vincent or overseas. My name is Jamali John. I am a barrister solicitor practicing here in St. Vincent. November would make 6 years since I've been admitted to practice here in St. Vincent. Apart from that, I try to keep myself occupied. I guess I'm probably
Please.
most known for my volunteer work in the church organization, but other than that, I'm just a regular young person who loves having fun. Yes?
Thank you, Jamali. And we'll move right on to the young woman sitting next to Mr. John, Laverne King.
I see you said my name, so. Hi, my name is Laverne King. I am a marketing consultant. I work for myself most of the times. I generally do advisory to persons who want to know how to better their social media presence as well as how to position their brand. Also represent the New Democratic Party. I'm a member of the New Democratic Party as the public relations officer. I suppose that is what earned me my position here today. Is it?
Quite possibly.
Yes, and I look forward to this discussion this afternoon.
Thank you, Ms. King. And we're going to have our two young persons online just introduce themselves now. We can start with you, Maurice.
Okay, right. So my name is Maurice Franklin. I am an attorney at law, and I was actually called to the bar with Jamali. So we'll both be celebrating 6 years in November. I am also the current president of the St. Vincent Planned Parenthood Association and the youngest serving board member of the Chamber of Commerce. And same as Jamali, I'm probably known for my charity as well, but not so much church, but more so on the side of sexual and reproductive health and rights education and women's rights.
All right, thank you, Maurice. And Jason, can you just tell us a little about yourself?
Hi, good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon, friends, both near and far. Jason Haynes from St. Vincent's and the Grenadines, practicing attorney at law in Barbados. I work currently at the University of the West Indies Cayford campus as a lecturer in law, and I also serve as Deputy Dean for Graduate Studies and Research here at the Faculty of Law. Outside of being an attorney at law / lecturer, I particularly enjoy engaging in sports and more particularly cricket. So I'm a huge fan of cricket. I still do play a bit myself on occasions. And I'm very much looking forward to having what will likely be a very interesting conversation this evening. So thank you very much for having me.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jason. I am your host, Vakisha John, and I'm going to jump right into the discussion with what I can call an icebreaker. So I'm going to throw it out there right now. If you can choose one leader in St. Vincent and the Grenadines who you would say is an exemplary leader, who would you choose and why? We would start with you, Maurice.
I'm going to need you to make your rounds because that's a very difficult question.
We can't hear.
Are you hearing me now?
Lead the conversation. A good leader in St. Vincent and why?
Okay, this person doesn't necessarily have to be in politics. It could be
No,
anybody.
just
Okay.
a leader.
Well, the leader who I am probably closest to is my pastor, Pastor Brent
Why did I know
Sejan.
you were going to say that?
Yeah, and I consider him a good leader. And the reason I consider him a good leader is because I have a particular perspective on what leadership is.
Right.
And he exemplifies what I believe leadership should be about, which is about allowing those who you lead to have an opportunity to develop themselves, to get experience, exposure, and he allows people with certain competencies to do their work. And so that is one of the reasons why I think that he's a good leader. But
okay, thank you.
yes.
What about you, Lavon?
Well, I would say Dr. Friday. Not just because I'm the public relations officer of the party, but I knew Dr. Friday before getting involved in politics. But why I would choose him at this point is because of this. I remember one time I was particularly upset about something and I was very happy and mad, and I went to him about it and he said, Lavon, sometimes you should choose honey as opposed to salt. And I think we need more of that in St. Vincent and the Grenadines right now. And when I look up at him, I see a man who exemplifies somebody that I would like to find. You know, he's someone who, so far as I know, he goes to church every time according to his faith. He, one of the things, I don't know if I'm permitted to say it, but if Dr. Friday gets the chance to choose between staying on the mainland or going home to his wife,
Are you sure you want to
he
say?
chooses to go, you know, and things like that. You look at it and you admire it. And when it's time for him to be stern, he is. And when it's time to have fun, he does that as well. And I think that we need more people in our country who are exemplary and people who actually choose, as opposed to putting more salt, put more honey, because we're existing in a time in our country where we need more of that.
Thank you. And what would you say about your leader, Maurice? Who would you choose?
Well, if I had to choose, I'd probably choose Miss Renee Batiste. She's actually my former employer. And, well, she holds a lot of positions, but she doesn't necessarily, there are a lot of people that hold positions and they don't do the work involved, and you know, they're involved in organizations, but they're just their name only. And what I admire about her is that she's still, even at her age, she's still going, she's still attending all of her meetings, and she's still trying to make a meaningful contribution where she can, even if it's outside of the political realm.
Thank you. Leader, and why?
That's a really interesting question, and in fact, I had to take some few minutes to really reflect on that, because nowadays there are not many particularly inspiring leaders around. And so, as a young person, I have to think very critically about who I consider to be a good leader and what are the qualities associated with that person, why I would wish to emulate that person in the context of that person being a good leader. Of course, Maurice did mention Miss Renee Batiste. I do, in fact, consider her to be one of the stronger leaders around and has traditionally been. But given that she's mentioned Miss Batiste, I would actually say that for me, it would be Miss Lucy Tibbles. Now, she may not be publicly known by many people as a leader in whatever field, as the case may be, but nonetheless, I think in my life, she has been most exemplary. That lady teaches at the St. Martin Secondary School. So she's a humble teacher, but the impact which she's had on those boys at that secondary school is truly remarkable. Now, I went to St. Martin's a couple of years ago, maybe about 15 or so years ago, and it was a very difficult period. Difficult because of my poverty-stricken situation, but also difficult because there were several issues happening at the time with many of the boys. They were, just really bad behaved. And in fact, many of them were killed subsequent to, graduating from the St. Martin Secondary School. But I remember that woman taking charge of what was really a volatile situation with respect to us as students. And she provided for us when we were in need. She made sure that at every juncture, we had what we needed. So for example, school uniforms, the book loan scheme, food. She enrolled me in particular on the Talk Shop program so that I can get a meal every single day. She ensured that I had every opportunity at getting scholarships and whatever opportunities were available at her disposal. And, she did it without seeking gratification, or rather, she did it without the need for public applause. She just did it out of the goodness of her heart. And I think oftentimes we ignore these sterling contributions simply on the basis that nobody makes a very big public spat about it. But I think that they're teachers, and many of us can speak to that, who in our lives and beyond our lives, who are doing exemplary work, and I think they must be commended for the quality service that they provide to Vincentian youths.
Thank you for all of the beautiful stories that you guys just gave. And from listening, I've pulled out some qualities like commitment, humility, the ability to resolve conflict, genuine love, sincerity, and that form of leadership that you all just spoke about. So now I'm going to bring it right back to politics, because I want, after this discussion, young persons in St. Vincent and the Grenadines should know what they should look for in a politician. So we are here to start shaping and molding mindsets. So what qualities do you think politicians should have, or even persons aspiring to be politicians, before they enter the field? Lavon, let's hear from you.
You know, I think when we look at the word politician and politics, there's a misconception about what politics is. Politics really and truly is the management of resources, scarce resources. And so we want to look for people who are able to manage the resources that we have in a country. And so we look at the track record of people, what they've done in their lifetime, how they would have contributed in their various spheres, be it through work, through civic involvement, hopefully through things like youth parliament that we don't have here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We look at those sort of things, national youth councils and so forth, that we do not have here either. We look at involvement in those sort of things and we see how they develop their soft skills, we see how they relate to people, and we look at their heart. The truth is, a lot of times people think that politics should have people who are bombastic, charismatic, and whilst it's good to be personable, we must also look at people who are accountable, people who have a track record of delivering and giving good results. I think that any person who, when they go into a ballot, into a voting box at the end of the day, when they put their X, they should put an X with the confidence knowing that they have put a decent human being into office, not just somebody who can go and say something, that's charismatic, because sometimes the meaning too, that is savage,
All right, and when you said decent human being, considering that St. Vincent and the Grenadines is known as a Christian nation, do you think that that person must be of a particular religious faith?
Not necessarily. One of the things that I had an issue with, I could remember when I first started getting involved in politics. I'm a baptized member of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I haven't been read out, have I? I'm just teasing Jamali. One of the things that people had told me is that, now that I have a position, I should no longer also hold a position in the church. And I found it to be a nonsensical position to have. I think that your religious stance shouldn't be what qualifies you or disqualifies you from office. If you're able and competent to run, to serve, and to make life better for people in the country, then why not? Why do you have to be somebody who believes in God? I would hope that you do, but at the end of the day, I don't think that that's what should determine whether or not you're electable.
And Jamali, what would you say on what Lavon just said, the traits that young people should look for, people in general should look for in political leaders? What would you take away or add to what she said?
Well, I would say that what is most important to me is love for country. I think that for me is number one. And when you look at politics, some people can believe that the goal is to win. It's to win an election. It's to come out on top. And you don't have to love people. You don't have to love your country in order to win, right? And so if winning and either getting into power or staying into power is your primary objective, and that's the end all, it's going to affect how you lead. And so if you put your country first, that sometimes could be to your political detriment. Right. But at the end of the day, if you are a person of integrity, even when it's not in your political interest, you still put your country first. And so if I look at our local context, country first must mean, and one of the things that I want to talk about when she was opening her answer, she spoke about managing resources and scarce resources. We are unfortunately from countries that are not resource-rich countries, right? And so I believe that the greatest asset that we have is our people. And for any country, even those countries that have different assets at their disposal, if the people don't manage those things very well, then it doesn't go, it would not unfold very well. And so you have to invest in your people, and you have to put your people first, because at the end of the day, it is the people together, they carry the country forward. And so we need people who put country first and make unity a priority. And so you look out for all of the people and not just some, right? So that's what I think is
and later
important.
on we'd come back to that whole idea of putting country first. We have a lot to talk about that. Jason, what would you say about the qualities that a leader should have, a leader in politics?
Yeah, I mean, I very much agree with what has been said before. I think service is one of those primary traits that a leader should have. You ought not to be getting into politics if you don't have a heart of service. That's just a reality. Because invariably, people are going to come to you on a very frequent basis asking for ways in which you might reasonably assist them. And if it is that you are concerned about the position or accolades or something else, people are motivated by a variety of reasons, then you would not be in a position to dispense with that constitutional obligation, which you have acceded to by virtue of putting yourself up to be a candidate in the electoral process. So I do think that what we need as politicians in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and even beyond in the wider context of the Caribbean, are people who are all about service, who are about giving to the community, who are about giving to the society in general, and ensuring that we are the very best that we can be as a community, as a society, more generally speaking. But I also think that integrity is a big part of politics, and it has often been downplayed or ignored, particularly in the recent past. Not only in a Caribbean context, but I think more generally speaking. I think the distinction has been made slightly earlier that there's certainly that delineation between church and state. And while, of course, I accept that as an on-the-garden principle, I also would like to posit that we need people of high moral suasion, not necessarily, as Laverne has said, people who are religious to the core, but people who are dedicated to some core values, which are underpinned by their morality. So values related to how they treat others, how they relate to people who they consider to be less than. And I think in certainly some of the interactions that I've seen as between politicians and persons who are considered to be less than, I have really raised in my mind certain significant questions, I think, regarding these people's ability to lead. Because if it is that you don't treat other people with the dignity and respect that they deserve, then why is it that you have sort of acceded to a particular political post? And I do think also it requires a degree of accountability and openness. Nobody is perfect. However, we oftentimes see politicians in our context parading as if they have it all together, that every decision that they have made is a decision that is worthwhile, that is impactful, and that is meaningful in terms of the effects of that particular decision in question. And the reality is that's not the case. Everyone who has been in a leadership position knows that people sometimes get it wrong. And in those circumstances where you've gotten it wrong, you owe it to the populace to come out very clearly and say, listen, while my intentions were pure, my intentions were good, on this occasion, I got it wrong. Can you provide some commiserations and allow me to continue to perform my duties in the way in which I envisage to perform these duties? But I think that there is a very, heavy-handed approach in terms of how some politicians deal with issues that are perceived by the public as not being consistent with their constitutional roles. And I think that is something that needs to be really examined seriously.
And just like I told Jamali, you mentioned the point that we also have to address integrity. So we would get to that. But Maurice, tell us, what are the traits that you think political leaders should have?
Sorry, well, it's very hard to follow up on what Jason said, because he basically, everything that he said, I agree with, as well as what Laverne and Jamali would have espoused earlier. And particularly for me, it's a commitment to service, and not just saying that you're committed to service, but I need to see your track record. I need to be able to point at you and say, yes, you know, I know this person. I know that they've been in the community. I know that they're familiar with the community, because I feel that also helps to build that same understanding of accountability and integrity. Right. I feel like it helps to build those values as well, because through service, you learn a lot. You learn how to govern. You learn how to interact with persons that you consider lesser than. You learn all of these things. And so if I can't point to your track record, I feel like it's just smoke and mirrors and more of the, oh yes, I'm a charismatic person, I know how to talk. That's not what I'm looking for.
Thank you, Marie. So we get the idea that being a superficial leader really is a thing that can lead to destruction. But we're going to talk about the actual political climate in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And I want to know, do we have enough young persons involved in politics? And if not, what can be done to invite more young persons to jump on board and to become either a member of a political party or a young politician? Maurice, what do you think?
I think we don't, obviously, have enough young people involved. But even when we do involve young people, it's still in a very tokenistic type of way. And that tends to go for a lot of organizations, not just political organizations, but even regional organizations. You hear, oh, yes, we have a youth ambassador. And then you're basically just a figurehead. You're just there so that they can cross off the box or ticket or say, yes, we have appointed, but what power do you have? What contributions are you able to make? Are your contributions being seriously considered? Or is it just something that you brush aside? The older heads will brush aside and say, well, that's not important. And one of the things I think that we really should be trying to do better is trying to involve our youth more and try to increase youth engagement. We need to get our youth parliament up and running. We need to get our youth council up and running, because these are the organizations that help to ensure that you understand the initial processes and help you to increase your engagement as a young person on that level. It's all very well and good for us to have our nonprofits and everything, but those types of organizations, I think, are really critical, especially in terms of our national youth policy. Like, where are we with that? So those are the gaps that I think we have currently.
To jump in right away.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really useful question that you've asked. I don't believe that we have sufficient numbers in terms of young politicians, leaders in the Vincentian context. I believe we can do much better. And in particular, we can do much better in the realm of gender diversity. Women have contributed traditionally in significant ways to our political landscape and otherwise, but yet we don't see that correlation between their traditional interest and participation and what is actually manifested before us in practice. I do think that there is space for women at the table, and oftentimes, in fact, the research suggests that where women are actively involved in politics, social issues in particular are better dealt with than perhaps their male counterparts. But I think that question that you've raised also raises a cognate question, which I think needs to be addressed frontally. And that is, what are some of the barriers that are impeding young people from becoming actively involved in politics? And I've spoken to a number of young persons, both in my role as a lecturer, but also as a former youth leader, being part of the Students' Council, the National Youth Council back in the day. And I think primary amongst some of the reasons why persons, especially young persons, are not inclined to participate in politics is because they are afraid of the implications which will inure if, in fact, they get involved. The implications are significant in a small island society as St. Vincent and Grenadines. It effectively means that if I were to choose to get into politics, I have to abandon every prospect of being treated potentially without victimization if I'm unsuccessful. There is no space for a young person who is interested in politics and who expresses that interest, participates, and perhaps fails. Thereafter, that person is subject to various kinds of discrimination and victimization. So why would I get into politics if I know that if I am not successful, I'm going to be victimized? In addition to that, we have in St. Vincent and the Grenadines this thing about undivided loyalty, that if I'm part of a particular party, that it means that every policy that the party passes or directive that it issues, I have to agree with it, And if I do not agree with it, then I'm not serving the interests of the party. That is small island mentality. That is the view of a local champion, as they say in Nigeria. My view is that if we are serious about getting people involved, especially young people in politics, we have to create safe spaces for young people to be involved. Those safe spaces mean that the young people must be able to communicate their thoughts, their views, their opinions in a manner which will be constructively received. Nobody wants to share their thoughts, and those thoughts are met with, with aversion, with criticism, and of course, in the Caribbean context, and in St. Vincent's context in particular, if you are a young person and you've not attained a certain echelons, or you're not connected to a particular leader or political party, as the case may be, your views don't really matter. So I think those are some of the barriers which exist in the context of young people's engagement with politics. And of course, a lot of it is not done on the basis of merit. Young people are tired and fed up of the fact that, I have to temper my words, because I mean, I've seen a lot in the recent past, and so I have to temper my words. Young people are fed up as to the fact that decisions with regard to who serves on what bodies and in what capacities is fundamentally based on associations. Who can be the biggest supporter of the party, who can be associated on the basis of being a family member or a friend or whomever it is. If that is the approach that is taken to who gets onto a particular political party, then people are not going to be inclined to participate. They're going to invariably shy away. So I think those are some of the barriers that really need to be addressed going forward in the context of our political landscape.
For that mouthful, and I think right now Lavon wants to jump in at this point.
I agree with what Jason says. What has my problem? The fact that Jason also says I have to be tempered with my words. It goes to what, and I'm not calling spade a spade and not calling evil by evil and wrong by wrong in St. Vincent. The truth is this: I was invited today under the topic, if there's a space for young people in politics in St. Vincent. And I think that what the organizers really want to ask is there an environment in St. Vincent and the Grenadines that facilitates young people coming to the table and being free to do so? And the answer is no, a big fat no. And why is that answer no? We have a government in place that stifles, tramples, defeats, embarrasses people who comes forward. That's the absolute answer. And so when we always have to be diplomatic in the way in which we answer questions, when we always have to temper the way in which we give our responses, it goes right back to the reason why there are not sufficient people, young people in politics. I remember somebody asking me about, so why don't you guys get more youths involved and so forth? And I said, have you heard about the 3 teachers who couldn't go back to their jobs after they ran? And it is blatantly obvious that the main reason why we don't have more young people in politics in St. Vincent is because we have a vindictive government that stifles and tramples people. It's true, and we have cases to prove it. This is not an opinionated position. This is a factual position. I remember when Vinette Frederick came into politics. I was still in secondary school then. She came to Emmanuel Kingstown. She was, I think, 26 years old. She was called snotty-nosed girl. She was called unorthodox. She was called so many things. I remember the Prime Minister's press secretary once calling me the petty response officer. I mean, when we have people in government who continuously, I mean, when I became PR of the party, I was 25 years old. I didn't know it all then. And surely Vinette as well, when she was 26 and just started, didn't know it either. I remember asking a young man last time, why don't you run? And he said, me? I'm afraid, Ralph. So, and I would ask why? And he says, well, I have my private business and I don't want it to suffer. And we have to be honest about the conditions and the environment that exists in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. People told me, girl, you just finished your master's, you're stupid. Why you gonna get involved in politics? And I said, because I want to help to create an environment where people like myself feel free to come forward, to contribute to conversations without thinking that, oh my God, bread is going to be knocked out of my mouth. And quite frankly, the only way we're going to fix a problem is when we change government.
And that's why I want to jump in to ask you, how can you convince young people who are afraid of victimization that the NDP government will be different? If the NDP party, know them, the NDP party, if they form government, will be different.
You see, the thing is this: by your fruits you shall know them. One of the things that Dr. Friday said during his campaign was, listen, I don't care how you got your job. I care that you're doing it. And what does that speak to? There are a lot of times that people say, even NDP supporters say, oh, plenty of people in the public sector who get their work only because of politics. That's fine. But when you have Dr. Friday saying, I don't care how you got it, I care that you're doing it. By your fruits you shall know them, and I'm a woman of the scripture. And I think that things like that reassures me that, hey, this is somebody who is concerned and somebody who says to you that I'm not about your partisan way of doing things. I want to know that things are being done. And until we have the opportunity, because the truth is this, we've already seen the fruits of labor. I would like to see the fruits of another administration.
Right, and Lavon, before I move on to Jamali, you spoke about the ULP's way of treating young people, you know, when they come into politics and how they treated the teachers who never got back a job. But on the other hand, we also see the ULP being a party with candidates who are very young. We saw Luke Brown, we saw the Honorable Saboto Caesar, we're now seeing Dr. Randall Brewster. And I believe that it may look or it may seem as if that the party is actually more welcoming to young people. What would you say about that?
I mean, it says to me that you just misunderstood what I said. I clearly just articulated that we exist in a context where if I go to Jamali and I say, Jamali, why don't you run in South Windward? Jamali is going to say to me, I just married, I have a young wife, I am thinking about my child to come, and I'm probably not going to get any government contracts. Other people in private sector probably not going to do work with me because I'm going to be viewed as an NDP lawyer. It's crazy. And I already articulated to you. I remember I sent in applications to several private places here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Some of them were asking for people with a first degree in marketing. I have a whole master's in it. They didn't even shortlist me. And so when you talk, it is very easy to get into politics when your party is in office because all of the odds are in your favor. If you look at politics now, even the age range in which even the ULP itself is attracting people, they're no longer people in their 20s. And that speaks to something. They've had no candidate in the last election who is under 30. And it says to me that even the younger people, more progressive people who are now leaving school, young professionals, are no longer attracted to them either, even when they're in the position of power. Okay, so we have a serious problem in St. Vincent where vindictiveness, authoritarian and totalitarian behavior has become the order of the day. And people may say, people have told me that I'm brave to go ahead. And I completely understand because by no means is it easy what I do and what I decided to do. There are people from my age group who's earning more than 6,000 EC or 7,000 EC who graduated the same time as me. I'm nowhere near that. So I literally feel the sacrifice that I've made. Would I encourage other people to do it? Well, there's no other way that we're going to get ahead unless we get rid of what we currently have.
So you've mentioned some of the factors, and Jamali, I want to hear from you on this because essentially what I was really trying to point out and have a discussion on was the appearance versus the reality. So too many people looking at the Unity Labour Party, they too might see a young party, a youthful party. And Lavon has just explained that even though it may seem that way, there is a reason why they may be able to attract those young people because they're in power. What would you say about that line of discussion?
Well, I'll get to that, right? I want to go back to the question that was asked. I mean, I'm bringing in the way, but I want to tackle that as well.
Yes, go ahead.
The two questions that were asked initially, do we have enough young people involved in politics, and what are the barriers that are preventing more young people from getting involved? From the comments that were made so far, you see the need to define some of these terms, and definitions is always a good place to start. So you hear the word young, and you have to define, what do you mean by young? And that is one of the things that I actually made a note on from since this topic surfaced, because I wanted all of us to be on the same page when we're talking about young people. And so I look for my definitions, and while there is no universally agreed international definition of the youth age group, for stats purposes, the United Nations uses a range between 15 and 24. I believe, and I know Maurice is here, the CARICOM Youth Organization, Commonwealth Youth Organizations, all of them that are affiliated with Commonwealth, including CARICOM, they use a range up to, I believe, 29 years, 364 days. In my church organization, we use the range 16 to 35, right? So we have different organizations that have a range that they use to refer to young people. And so we don't necessarily have to agree on a range, but I think it's important for us to at least be on the same page, because you call some names and I don't necessarily know the ages of everybody, right? You call some names, Luke, and we hear these names thrown around all the time: Camilo, Sabuto, Carlos, Brewster, whatever. I don't know, are they under 35? Are they already in their 40s? Are they actually young?
They're very much in their 40s.
Well, if they're in their 40s.
When they started, I believe all three of them.
Camilo was not in his
Orlando Brewster.
Well,
the three I reference, Luke Brown, Saboto Caesar, and Orlando Brewster.
So, well, that is when they just came in.
Yes, when they
now
started.
then I don't believe they're in that range, right? So if you're making that statement, because I think the statement that was made was the Unity Labour Party has young people, right? I wouldn't necessarily agree. I mean, these guys they won't fall within the range that I'm thinking about, at least not anymore, right? So I think it's fair to say that neither the Unity Labour Party or the New Democratic Party have who I would consider to be young people. And if you stretch the range to include people in their 40s, 50s, then you disenfranchise persons who are actually young, right? When you pinpoint those people to say, well, they are young.
Well, remember we were speaking about the challenges that they face, and Lavon spoke about Vinet entering at 26. So the conversation went along that line, that in terms of molding the Unity Labour Party may seem, because those guys,
it may seem that way, right? And I'm sure if you trace the history, you might very well have had a point in time when NDP...
If I could jump in there, Jamali, I know it's your turn, but for those who may not have been following politics prior to now, because a lot of us only know our 75-year-old Prime Minister. Prior to when Terrence started politics, he had just graduated from university. They used to call him the baby of politics. When people like when the NDP was in office, most of the men who were actually there as well, and women, were people who started in their 20s and 30s. Which goes back to the point of it is easy to get in when your party is in office.
If you trace the history of the NDP, you might very well have had a point in history when they had persons going in when they were young, but certainly time has moved on, and that's not the case anymore.
Definitely
right? And the same is true for the ULP. So time has moved on, they have aged up, they don't have people in that range anymore. And so that is one. Number two, in terms of barriers that are preventing young people from going in, I mean, Jason gave a mouthful And when I think about my own self, one of the things that Jason mentioned was political allegiance. People expect you to have this unwavering loyalty to the political party. And I think if I were to ever consider going into politics, that would be my biggest barrier, because most Vincentians, when they are assessing any issue, they do so purely through the lens of politics. And so nothing is right anymore, nothing is wrong anymore. Whether something is right or wrong depends on who is doing it. And so if NDP is doing it, then it is wrong. It should be condemned. And people would, issue statements, talk about how disgusted they are at this conduct or this statement. But then when your party people are doing it, you're in a corner, you have nothing to say, and people would never know that you are aware of what is going on in the country, because there's this deafening silence. And that is true for both sides of the political fence. For me, I have to be true to myself. I have to be true to my conscience. So if something is wrong, and I'm a part of an organization and something is wrong, I mean, in the church organization where I function now, I get a lot of blows for this, because so many things happen in that organization that shouldn't happen or shouldn't happen the way it's supposed to happen. And I don't necessarily sit down and figure, well, we're going to just, act as if this is okay. It's not okay, right? And somebody has to be held accountable. Somebody has to say something about it. And it can't just be business as usual when things are happening that are not supposed to happen. But by and large, and when you look at the young people, right? Because you mention names and we talk about age and when they went in, but can we truly say, remember Maurice talked about tokenism. We're not having young people in there just for the sake of saying we have young people in there. Can we truly say that any of the young people who went in within recent times have been different from the senior politicians that we have? Can we truly say that? My position is no. They go in and they have not sought to distinguish themselves on those key points. They go in and they just fall into the same mold. And so I have to ask the question, what then is the value of having young people in politics if they are going to go in and act just like the older ones who are there? Might as well you don't have them, because you lose the benefit of having them if they don't chart their own course, if they don't rise above the nonsense that has been the status quo for the longest while, and show that, look, I am here, I am young, I am fresh, I am new, and I'm bringing something different. They haven't really brought anything different. They're just walking in the footsteps of those who have gone before them, right? And so these are some of the analysis that I would make, right? And so that's a barrier, because everybody expects that if you align yourself to one political party, that you have to agree with everything that they say. You have to agree with everything that they do. And if you ever were to step outside of reading from their song sheet, then the consequences come even for those who are part of that political party. And I don't think I'm prepared to deal with that. If you're going right, I'm with you. If you're going wrong, I'm not with you. And that's just what it is.
All right. So we heard a lot about the barriers, to young persons entering politics. And something that jumped out at me is that the barriers to maybe the lack of knowledge that some young persons have on the history of politics in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. If my memory serves well, from what I was told by my father, I think Burton Williams was actually around 25 years old when he was the Minister of Health. Right. So we know there are young persons who were there. But the reality is, and I want us to be very honest with ourselves, because we are speaking from a generation that has seen the Unity Labour Party in government for a very long time. And while the analysis made by yourselves and myself may be of a certain level, there are persons who look on and what they see is exactly what they interpret. Being here, having discussions like these should help to change that mindset. And these are the things I'm trying to point out when I ask certain questions. So, Jason, I'm going to allow you to jump into what Lavon and Jamali just said on the appearance of, the tokenism, the idea of tokenism, where more persons seem to have entered the Unity Labour Party versus the New Democratic Party, and how well they have been doing, and if that is something that young people should look at when they're making a decision as to who they should vote for.
That's a really interesting question. I mean, I think one person who has not been mentioned, but who's entered politics relatively recently for the ULP is Kizal Peters. I think she's a minister in the PM's office. I do agree in large part with the conversation thus far that just as a matter of principle, if you are in power, it is so much more easier for you to generate interest and generate support, particularly amongst the younger population. You have something to offer which the other party does not have to offer. I think it's simple mathematics. And so I think, therefore, the analyses across several jurisdictions, not just St. Vincent and the Grenadines, but I think across the Caribbean, seem to suggest that the party that is in power is more likely than the other party, or parties as the case may be, to generate youthful interest insofar as their political landscape is concerned. So I don't think that beginning the conversation from the point of view that it is a level playing field, that it is easy for young people to get into politics on both sides of the spectrum is a genuine sort of a place to start. I believe that there must be a recognition that power imbalances really do impact the extent to which young people engage with the political processes. But I think certainly it is to be commended that many of the young persons who have gotten into politics as of recent have done quite a commendable job in their respective ministries. They have not been perfect. And of course, politicians generally are not perfect. So we are not expecting perfection. But what I've seen, certainly from many of the young persons who've gotten into politics, is that they have a genuine interest in politics and a genuine interest in serving the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I think part of the challenge has been recognized earlier, and it's worth reiterating that oftentimes when these individuals get into politics initially, there is this sort of utopian view that they're able to make significant changes, that they're able to be positively impactful, that they can change the landscape of how politics is operated in our small island society. But when they get in, they fall into the realm of what has been the tradition. And you don't need to look further than a viewing of the parliamentary proceedings on a pretty regular basis. I am appalled genuinely by the extent to which our politicians, who many of them are senior members of their political parties, engage with each other, engage with the public's issues that are of paramount importance to our Vincentian society. The fact that these individuals can behave in such childlike manner does not incentivize me, certainly, and I'm sure many young people, to want to get into politics. If you are addressing issues that confront our Caribbean society, our Vincentian society more particularly, issues that relate and touch and concern the environment, our economy, our social protection, you must bring to those discussions an attitude which is mature, which is serious. Frankly speaking, I'm unimpressed by the level of immaturity that I've seen in our parliament as of since I've been following parliament, really, the last several years.
Thank you, Jason. And Maurice, we'd like to hear from you at this point on the general discussion that we're having.
Well, seeing as I would have mentioned the tokenism issue previously, right? What would you like me to comment more on?
Do you think the appearance of young persons in certain parties could sway voters? Do you think it's important? What do you think we can do to help young people to see beyond the superficial level of that appearance?
As I was saying before, right? It's not necessarily about having the faces or having the young people. We need to ensure that young people understand political processes. They understand, okay, how did you arrive at this decision? How can, okay, if you're interested in politics, how can I, when I do enter politics, how can I influence change? Is it possible for me to influence change in this party? Is it that it's just that, I'm not really involved in decision-making processes. I'm just here, I'm just carrying out instructions. How does it work? And in order for young people to understand how it works, I think it's important for us to have entities like the National Youth Parliament, National Youth Council, because then you're engaged in the decision-making processes and you're able to be more involved. So that's why I think we need to start. It's not necessary, because even so on a regular basis, I don't see young people getting up and saying, oh yes, I'm going to go and watch politics today. I'm going to go and watch Parliament. Oh, this is so exciting. You're not going to do that. So it has to be something where you are actively engaged. You're not just looking at them making the decisions. You're actively engaged, even if it's on a pretend level, so to speak, like you would do with a National Youth Parliament. Just for you to understand, because I think that's key for you being interested in the first place. Because a lot of people are, how do I put it, sort of apathetic about the whole thing at this point. They've decided that I'm just going to focus, because I've seen this a lot recently. I'm just going to focus on making my money and keeping my head down and let the politicians do what they will. I'll make my money and mind my business.
Mentorship and how important it is. But Jamali wants to come in here on a final point.
Well, my point might be a little lengthy, so I don't know if I should make it now or later on. But since this conversation started, we have had numerous references to National Youth Council and National Youth Parliament. And it is bothering me because those suggestions are so old. They are so old, and persons have mentioned and called for those things over and over and over again for years. I have personally written on that before. And to my surprise, I was listening to Parliament sometime early last year, and I went back through the parliamentary hearings trying to find, because I wanted to quote the minister verbatim. Went into the Parliament and suggested that the reason why we have no National Youth Council is because there is a lack of interest among young people.
And is that true?
That's not true. Clearly, it's not true. Because if you bring together a panel of young people and they're all saying, look, we want to be more involved, we want to see more organizations, how can you then go into the People's Parliament and say then there's no interest? It's not true, right? And so we don't have a National Youth Council. We don't have a National Youth Parliament because the people who are there don't care for us to have it.
And government.
No, they don't care for us to have it. And even after this program, because I'm sure if they're not watching, they would hear what we have to say, it still won't happen. I've gotten to the point where I believe it will never happen, even though I believe the minister who has responsibility for youth this term is a young person, right? So we will see if it happens under this young person. But when Maurice was talking a while ago, she talked about young people being involved, not just in a traditional sense of politics, but being involved in other ways. And there is an interesting national conversation going on right now about tourism. And a young person is, of course, caught up in all of that, right? And I think if young people actually had an opportunity to be part of leadership, because there's a difference between having a seat at the table and having a voice at the table. Having a seat at the table doesn't mean you have a voice at the table. And a lot of young people, they have the seat, but they don't have a voice, right? They're just there to fill the seat, but when it's time for decision making to take place, then they don't really have much of a say in setting the policy and making decisions. And so, 2 examples very, very quickly. I traveled recently, and it was my first time traveling in this COVID context, and the difference between St. Vincent and Florida, where I traveled to, was so stark. In order for me to leave here, I have to apply for a PCR test online. So I apply for the PCR test online, and then I go to Kingston at the Stewart office to pay for the PCR test. Stand up in this long line, hot sun, paying for a PCR test. After I'm done paying at the hospital for the PCR test, I have to go back to my district clinic to do the PCR test. And after I'm done doing the PCR test at my district clinic, I have to come back to the lab in town to collect the results for my PCR test. When I went overseas, I had to do a test to come back. All I did in Miami, went online, I fill out, set an appointment. I set an appointment, 9 o'clock, XYZ time. I go there, there's a drive-through. I didn't even have to come out of my vehicle. I didn't take me more than 10 minutes to go through the process, because by the time I get there, they have my information in the system. The people have their iPads, they pull it up, they scan a code, they give me my vial, and they sent me to where the test was being done, swab, and I was gone. In less than 24 hours, I got my results via email, right? So I set my appointment online, I got my results online. It was just a matter of driving through to get the swab done, right? And then after I did that, I came to St. Vincent. I landed at Argyle International Airport at 2:35 p.m., right? The flight wasn't even full, American Airlines. After traveling, my flying time from Miami to Argyle was 3 hours, 5 minutes. It took me 2.5 hours to clear through Argyle International Airport, because they have us there in this long line, only 2 people doing tests. They have to, even though you fill out a pre-arrival form online, you come here, you have to meet with the COVID task force, go through the same information again, do the test. And I am asking myself, you talk so much about having an international airport. You're in conversation with all of these airlines, right? But I come here, there's only one flight on the ground, and I then have to spend almost as long as it took me to fly here, standing in a line to go through. And I say, if a young person was at a decision-making table, there is no way, there is absolutely no way I would be at Argyle International Airport for 2.5 hours. And I was sitting at 15F. That's in the first half of the plane. And I was wondering to myself, if it's taking me this long to clear, and I booked the closest seat to the front of the plane, I wonder what time the person who sits on the back of the plane cleared through the airport. Had to be more than 3 hours. And I'm saying to myself, and we're talking about having Virgin Atlantic landing here in October with a bigger jet with more people. God forbid we have multiple jets landing at Argyle at one time. You might be there all day just to clear through a simple process.
So you believe that young persons at the table would have a more modernized,
because young people are into technology.
Right.
And for Christ's sake, you can't even get your COVID results by email. You have to go and stand up in a line at a lab to collect results. These simple things. And then you have a young person who is working at tourism, making a Facebook post about the fact that we don't even have a website that you can go to get information about St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And everybody's saying, well, you're working there, this is your employer, you shouldn't go on Facebook and criticize your employer. That's as far as they can see.
Right.
But for Christ's sake, you sit down, you look at what the young man is saying. Does he have any merit in what he's saying? Is there something there that we can explore? Because I'm almost certain at the end of this whole charade, he's probably going to get fired, and then the nonsense is just going to continue. But if we actually had young people who were involved in decision-making process, St. Vincent and Grenadines could be so much different. But we have young people who are educated. We talk about education revolution. Young people go away, they travel, they come back, and then you just put them in a corner.
If they come back,
you put them in a corner. They can't ask questions. They can't bring original ideas. So the youth perspective gets knocked out the door, because you have a set of old people who figure they know everything when clearly they don't. And if young people talk up and say anything, then you get victimized and punished for it.
If I can jump in,
come on.
right?
Wait, well, I want just to stick a pin, because in the interest of time, we have some issues that we want to raise. So I want to talk about mentorship.
But I had a specific point that I absolutely must make on this.
Okay, can you make it in about 2 minutes?
Yes, I can. I hope to. I think when we talk about the National Youth Council and the Youth Parliament, that would be very direct and specific about why we don't have it. The truth is they were there before the ULP got into office. And they're not there now that the ULP is in office. It is obvious. It's the only correlation that exists, that the ULP destroyed it. How did they do that? They systematically do it by reducing the subvention in the budget that will fund these sort of things. So when we talk about it, that it don't exist, we must just be very specific and blatant about it. And I heard recently that they're going to be starting back the National Youth Council.
You heard?
I heard this. No, wait. Well, I'm going to
You
tell
heard
you
it
how
from an official?
I'm going to tell you how I found out. It's a good thing you allow me to make the point, right? I was talking to a friend who said to me, oh, you know, I'm going to be doing, and I said, what? And I said, but that's interesting. And the reason why I found this out in a casual, by the way, conversation, it reiterates to me the point that there's no deliberate effort by the government to do anything in a non-partisan or an inclusive way. Had I been in office, or had I been the minister, who's the minister of youth these days? It used to be that guy who did nothing. It used to be Gus Gus.
Right.
And then now it's Brewster, I think, is it? Right.
Dr.
Now,
Brewster.
if you're doing it, both political parties have youth arms, whether or not they're functioning or not functioning. In theory, they both do, right? If I was going to restart the National Youth Council, I was going to email out to both political parties that this thing is happening and I would like your input on it if you can send a representative from your youth arm to be a part of this. And the mere fact that we were not in the New Democratic Party notified of this says to me that they're probably handpicking who they want to be on this National Youth Council so that they will just regurgitate and repeat their positions. And whilst it may come under this current guy, but the way that he started, he's already going wrong.
Right.
No.
So,
You know?
If the youth council is
thank
going
you.
to be another arm of the ULP, then it
It
better we
makes
don't
no
have it.
sense.
Better
And
we
I'm
don't have it.
telling you,
All right, I hear you and I get the
Fact.
passion, Lavon, I get the passion and I understand, but we have to move on in the interest of time.
of course.
So we're going to talk about mentorship and how important is it for a young person to seek that form of support before he or she enters politics? And who should they get mentorship from? Jason, what do you think?
Well, I think I want to piggyback just a little on this issue of the NYC, National Youth Council. And principally because I was in the National Youth Council up till 2016. In fact, 2006, while I was in secondary school. And then I was president of the National Students Council in 2007 to 2008. So I have some background knowledge as to what transpired in that context. No, there were a combination of issues that would account for why the National Youth Council failed quite miserably. Now, of course, colleagues would have mentioned here in the panel that the reduction in the subvention was in fact a significant determinant behind the failure of the Youth Council. But quite apart from that, there was also the issue of the Youth Council having become dominated by old heads, people who were way past the age of 45 years old, who were bent on sharing their ideas and giving directives and controlling the organization fundamentally. In addition to that, there was the challenge that the Youth Council became politicized. So there were fractions amongst the Youth Council that supported the ruling party, and there were fractions that supported the opposition party. And as a result of that, when we had meetings, annual general meetings in particular, there were very controversial discussions that didn't focus their attention on youths and youth development. And so invariably, the Youth Council had to fail. It had to fail because of these countervailing forces which impeded its continued development. Now, the Youth Council, prior to its failure, was very actively involved in various activities. I was the moderator back in the day for the Youth Challenge radio program on NBC Radio. We hosted it every Friday evening at 5 p.m. It was an hour-long program, and it was broadcast on Saturday mornings. And it involved a considerable number of persons across the political divide who were young, who were excited about discussing issues that touched and concerned young people. With its failure, we don't have that type of direct engagement anymore. Now, going now to the question that you asked, Vakisha, I think it's a really useful question. I see youthfulness has slipped off my tongue because I'm really concerned about youthful engagement in politics. There are simply not enough mentors. Mentors who are people who are accountable, people who have high moral turpitude, people who are serious about service, who young people can rely upon for the purposes of receiving mentorship. So that's a fundamental problem. It is not that young people don't want to be mentored. It is that people are not making themselves available to be mentors. In addition to that, I think we have a fundamental aversion in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, as well as more generally the Caribbean, to bright young people having a seat at the table. I think fundamentally that is it. I speak not only from my perspective as a young person who has not been welcomed with open arms by anybody, as a matter of fact, notwithstanding having gone through school and done everything that people said that I was supposed to do, but several other young people, including my wife, who is a Barbadian national. She experienced that same struggle. I mean, the reality that you come back to the region expecting that you would contribute, and then nobody makes opportunities available to you. What are you going to do in those circumstances? Of course, you can create opportunities, but those opportunities are limited in this traditional two-party system that we have, which has failed miserably. Unless you're prepared to be an independent senator in St. Vincent, you have to be aligned to a political party, and you receive mentorship from whomever you align to. And the reality is, if you are not in a position to, at the moment, align yourself wholeheartedly, or you're simply not interested in doing so, mentorship is simply not at your disposal. That is a reality. It is an unquestionable reality. Young people, bright young people, shy away from returning to St. Vincent and the Grenadines because they don't have a seat at the table. No seat is made available for them.
Thank you, Jason. And Maurice, I'd like to hear from you in terms of mentorship. How important do you think it is, and where can young people get mentorship from?
I think mentorship is very important, obviously. And of course, we would emulate our role models. But what I think people are not picking up in the discussion is obviously, political parties and political youth arms aren't the only means by which you can become engaged. A part of politics is being able to influence policy. And I would always, always, always extol the virtues of being involved in an NGO, being a volunteer, picking your cause. Like my cause, obviously, is women. So I run to any organization that I see that works on women's rights because, I'm interested in that. And then in being interested in that, I find the opportunities to meet persons who have influence and be able to learn from them. I have the opportunity to take up various roles, and there I learn different skills. So I feel like we're missing the part where, yes, okay, maybe they're not making space for us at the level of representational politics, but you can make your own space. If you work hard enough, you can build your own table. You can find other ways that you could make change in your community. So for instance, if I woke up one day and I thought, you know what, I think I would like to help young people with this particular issue. How can I do it? I go about and I figure out, okay, how am I going to do this? Do I have to join an organization to do this? Do I need to speak to this person to get into this school, to reach these young people? What do I need to do? As opposed to thinking, we have X party in power. They're clearly not doing anything. They're not interested. And okay, it makes you upset. Yes, it makes you upset. But then you're just sour at the end of the day if you don't for me, I'm all about making your own opportunities. I am in every possible organization that I can join because I want to be able to make a contribution to my community without having to jump into the fray, so to speak, or, oh yes, I'm going to swear filthy to a party and have to end up in all of that. Whereas there are other ways that you could make change. There are other ways that you could contribute without having to do that, and contribute to your own development. Because I think that's really important. And that's how you find your mentors. That's how I found my mentors, through charity and through being engaged.
Right here to give her take on this aspect of the discussion.
Finding mentorship?
Yes. How important is it?
I think one of the things that we should allow and make room for in St. Vincent is for youth arms to be in secondary schools for persons from like 4th and 5th form. So I think that even from if we're looking at getting more youth involved and youth at the table, I think that it might be a wild idea to some people, but I really do believe that you could have youth arms for both political parties for students starting from 4th and 5th form. What that does is it starts to get them involved in civic conversations and give them a certain exposure that they would need to garner necessary soft skills. I'm not too sure what exists in the Unity Labour Party as it relates to mentorship, but I know for me that when I started in our political party, there were other women like Zita Barnwell, Maya Eustace, Vinette Frederick, and so forth, who from time to time, who always reach out and ensure that, hey, if you need anything, I am here. Even from some of the men in the party as well. Dr. Friday, there's never been a time when I couldn't, reach out to him to ask about how do I go about certain things. I think that that mentorship is very important, even whilst you're trying to find your own voice. But we have to also appreciate that when you just come to the table, especially in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, when there are not many civic groups that allow young people to hone their soft skills. And I think we're seeing that now, the way in which some people are commenting on their unfortunate dilemma. I think that had there been better mentorship on the side of the ULP, we probably would have seen better attitudes coming out by our senator in her unfortunate situation. I think that the more exposed young people who are just introduced in politics are to mentorship and guidance, the better it will be for them, because the truth is nobody's going to get it right on their first go, second go. And no matter how long you've been involved in something, there's still going to be times when you mess up. But what we always have to look at is, what is my attitude like when I mess up? Can I go and talk to somebody in my political party about it? Will one of them actually be able to, as opposed to only defending me, tell me, yes, Laverne, you were wrong? And it's very important that mentorship is encouraged and facilitated. And I like to say to anybody, like I said, I don't know what happens in the ULP, but when you join the New Democratic Party, we very much have an environment that encourages mentorship. And I really wish that Senator Bala was able to make it today so that he could have been able to, give some insight. But I do know for us, we provide the environment that facilitates those sort of things. In fact, if I could wrap up on the point that in our youth arm, what we try to do is pair our young appointees with senators, MPs, and so forth, to help them to become more developed. So,
all right, thank you, Laverne. And Jamali, what would you say about mentorship?
You see, I guess I'd be alone on this one, because mentorship is a very, very tricky thing. It's very, very tricky in my view, because if I'm looking for a mentor it doesn't have to be politics, in any area of life, I have to find somebody who I could say, I want to be like this person. I think that's where mentorship starts. So you have somebody you look up to and you say, yo, I would really like to be like this person. And you probably approach them, if they don't approach you, and say, can you teach me A, B, C, X, Y, Z, whatever. And when it comes to politics and mentorship, the way I look at it, the country is going in a particular direction right now. And I am hoping that we would have a new crop of politicians who could pull it back from the direction that it is going and take us into a different direction, right? Now, if we are all agreed that we need to be going in a different direction, what I'm struggling with right now is, how do you say this politician or these politicians are leading us in a direction that we don't want to go, but then you go to them for mentorship? It doesn't make any sense, right? That is troubling me right now. So if you were to ask me, say, Jamali, you want to go into politics? If I say yes, and you say, well, align yourself with somebody who you figure could teach you the ropes. Most of the politicians that are in St. Vincent right now, I wouldn't want to be under their leadership, because I don't want to be like them. I don't want to walk in their footsteps. I want to take some different route. So for me, I believe that within young people, as they are, I think they already have a number of gifts and abilities that they can implement even now for the benefit of the country. And so when my first experience in politics, when I was at Norman Manley Law School in Jamaica, I went in for Constitutional Committee chairperson. And I mean, it was unlikely, because when on Mona campus, non-nationals going in for politics and winning is a challenge, right? Because Jamaicans tend to support their own.
I've won twice.
Right? So I won. And the first thing that I did when I won that election, there was a young lady in the class who got the award for legal drafting and interpretation. And I wanted us to draft a new constitution, not just to amend it, but to draft a new one altogether. And the first thing that I did when the results came back, I went to her and asked her to be on the subcommittee. And that is what you have to do. When you're a leader, you assess, one, what is there to do? And number two, you put together a team of people who can help you get it done. And so naturally, you put together a group of people who are the best you can find to accomplish a particular goal. And if I look at you, Sister John,
Lakeisha's
and I say, this young lady is an intelligent young lady, I want her on my team. I want you on my team because I think that you are intelligent, and you are going to bring something to the table that would benefit the group, the organization, whatever the case is. And if you come on board as a young, intelligent person, I have to allow you to bring what you are bringing to the table and not have a situation where you are here and I'm calling all the shots. You understand?
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, whatever you came to bring, you can't bring it, because I am basically running your program, and you are almost there for no reason. And that is important, because that is the philosophy of leadership that I have seen in most organizations that I work in. They have the people at the top who tell themselves they know everything, and you bring people, and Jason keep repeating, bringing intelligent people on board. And I am telling you, when you want the best people on board, you want the educated people on board, you want the intelligent people on board, but intelligent people are not easy to deal with, because intelligent people are going to come on your board, on your organization, and give you a hard time, because they are going to ask questions, they are going to bring a new perspective, they are going to challenge you in ways that, frankly speaking, most leaders are not prepared to deal with. Right. And when you step up in that way, they look at you as a troublemaker, and then the next thing for them to do is try to sideline you, right? And that is one of the challenges that we have to address when it comes to mentorship, because if when you go back to the example that I used a while ago about young people, I mean, I'm telling you, I believe that young people are gifted enough already, that if we just allow them the space, they would do amazing things.
Thank you, Jamali. And we are going to take a break. When we get back, we just jump onto talking about homophobia and are homosexuals allowed freely to become a part of the political arena in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We are going to enjoy some of our fruits donated by the Role Models Fruits, and you can find them downstairs right on the court. And we're here at Computech. See you soon. Stay with us.
My Digicel presents Hit via How To. Here is how you can purchase a plan in the My Digicel app and get instant access to all of our apps. It's simple. Let me show you how. From your home screen, find the plans and bundles icon in the lower left corner of your screen. Tap it to see your available plans and bundles. You can choose between a Prime bundle with data and talk or pick a plan from the Available Plans tab. Find the plan that's best for you. Then hit confirm and you're ready to go. With your new plan, you may have access to more of our apps. Find them in the More from Digicel section and hit download for each of our new apps. You can also upgrade your current plan or bundle under the Active Plans section of your homepage. Excited to try it out? Download the My Digicel app today. My Digicel, better together.
Drive for free, talk for free with Hyrule. You can win it all.
That's right. Free beer, free rent, free utilities, groceries, and fuel.
Check the bar for your 3 for 10. Look under your crown and win. Everything is rent, free. Utilities, groceries, fuel. You can win it all. Yeah.
Enjoy Ice Cold Hyrule 3 for 10 and check under the crown for the Live Up stamp and win a $200 cash voucher instantly.
Hyrule, you can win. Everything is free.
There's over $100,000 in prizes to be won. Rise up S3G and win with Hyrule. Terms and conditions apply. Promotion ends August 15th. Must mean 18 and older. Please drink responsibly.
Computech Limited is one of the oldest computer businesses in SVG. Computech supplies a wide range of desktop and laptop computers and printers to suit your home or business, and is the only company that provides a full range of IT solutions to our many customers across St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Computech, your authorized service center for Dell, HP, and Lenovo. Ideally located in Kingstown on the corner of Egmont and Bay Street, opposite the Financial Complex building. Remember the name. Computech, 25 years and getting better.
Super Bingo. Bingo tickets play for opportunity to win US $25,000 on Sunday, 29th August 2021, beginning at 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. 13 chances to win. 6 US $1,000 cash prizes. 4 $2,000 US cash prizes. 3,000 US cash prizes. And 1 $5,000 US cash prize. Games will be played on www.bingomaker.com. Login and access information would be provided upon purchase. Proceeds from this event goes towards a worthy cause. August 29th, El Dorado Super Bingo.
St. Vincent and the Grenadines is known to be a very homophobic country. We've been trying, a number of persons have been trying to break the stigma and have been trying to make things equal for these persons. I'd like to ask the panelists, do you think that there's a safe space for persons who are openly homosexuals to enter the political arena? Maurice, I'd start with you on this question.
Definitely not. Obviously, buggery is still illegal, and that's what we refer to it as. We don't recognize buggery as rape. So clearly, there's no legal space within which you could come out and say, yes, I wave the rainbow flag and I'd like to engage in representational politics. And we also have the fact that, as you said earlier, we identify as a Christian society. So that further reinforces the idea that you can't even outside of the political realm be comfortable as an openly homosexual person. So no, my answer is no, there's no space. We have made no space, and we continue to wave our church flags and say that, oh, you know, it's wrong and God says it's wrong, so let's just shun them. They don't exist, right? Okay.
And right there, we hear that there's an exclusion of a certain set of people in St. Vincent and the Grenadines when it comes to politics, and it seems that our legislation has a very big role to play in that. Jason, what would you say about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I do endorse the view that has just been shared by Maurice, that indeed, in the context of our Vincentian society and Caribbean societies more generally speaking, it is not a safe space for homosexuals to participate in the political arena. As a society, we have not gotten to the place as yet where people are comfortable with, one, having open conversations about the issue in the first instance, and secondly, going even as far then as to encourage persons who are openly identifying as gay or bisexual or otherwise to participate in the political process. So I do agree with Maurice in the sense that the legal processes around that particular activity itself, they reinforce the exclusion of this particular category of persons. But I don't think also that it is necessarily a fair question, because it is as if we are saying that perhaps let's draw the analogy to the 1800s, where women were not perhaps included in various aspects of society, including politics. Societies by their very nature evolve. And with time, invariably, as you would have seen in other jurisdictions, you will see persons who openly and otherwise identify as homosexual or otherwise becoming actively involved in politics. I do think that the law does, in fact, create an impediment, but I don't know whether or not, and I don't think, in fact, we have an appetite just yet as a people, as a society, given our self-proclaimed Christian orientation, to head in that direction. And I say self-proclaimed because on issues such as homosexuality, there is sanctimonious outpouring of condemnation. But of course, there are other issues which socially or otherwise are unacceptable, but which are allowed and which are countenanced as being inherently good traits for a person who is interested in being part of politics. You know, womanizers are able to participate actively in politics, and there's no condemnation around it, among other things. But that's a discussion for another time. I don't think we're just there yet.
Jason, and Lavon, what would you say on this question?
You know, I think very much that when we look at the context in which we're having the discussion about youth in politics, I think that the young people in St. Vincent and the Grenadines are seemingly more open to sexuality, different sexuality, and the existence of it in our society. If you look outside of our island territory and other places, there are people who are in politics that people can say, yes, he or she is gay, bi, homosexual, whichever. I think that in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, whilst I don't know of situations where persons are being physically in danger. I can say for sure, I know verbally, perhaps, but I don't know if we are still at the point where people are still physically in danger. But I do think that our young people are more open to the idea of it happening. But as Jason said, I think that invariably, as time goes by, these are things that we will see happening. Personally, it's neither here nor there for me, because when it comes on to politics, I think that in the same way in which people allow somebody who's shocking up to run, somebody who is going to give security guards a reassuring kiss and stuff like that, if we allow them to be in office, then fine. As a matter of my Christian principles, then it's different. But I think that when it comes on to politics, we look at what people have to offer to their country and how well are they able to serve in that capacity. And their sexual orientation is between them, their God, if they believe in one, and so forth.
Thank you. And Jamali, what would you say?
The question was if there's a safe space for,
yes.
Right, if there's a safe space. My answer to that is, I don't think there's a safe space for anybody to get involved in politics. I mean, we have to be honest, right? I have heard this conversation before when it related to women in politics, and they say, we don't have a lot because we don't really have any elected women in our parliament, sadly. People say, well, we don't have enough women in politics, and the reason that they presented was women are afraid to get involved in politics because when women get involved in politics, people have all kind of nasty things to say about you, and they run you down into the ground, and men can deal with those things better than women. At the end of the day, look, I am a straight Christian young man. You think if I go into politics today, tomorrow, I'm going to have it easy? Every time I have to go on a public forum or make any appearance, I brace for the backlash because there's always going to be some backlash. I can remember the very first time I published an article. Went into the comment section. Now when I publish articles, I don't go in the comment section anymore because you know what's going to be there. You're going to have some people.
Not broad enough for the comment section, Jamali.
Most of the time, it's going to be a waste of time anyway, right? So as long as you are going to publish an article, as long as you are going to come on a public forum like we are now, as long as you are going to come into politics, be prepared for blows. Men get blows, women get blows. If you are homosexual, you go and get blows. You have to just deal with it. Everybody does get blows. And so you have to just brace yourself for it and just deal with it. It's not something that's unique to women. It's not unique to homosexuals. Everybody does get it. And so while we could say it should not be this way, and while we could advocate for us to be more mature as a society, I know realistically it is not going to change. And so you just let people say what they want to say.
Thank you for that advice, Jamali. And Lavon, I'm going to come straight to you and Maurice, especially to talk about women in politics. What are some of the factors that you think are responsible for the fact that women have not been elected in St. Vincent and the Grenadines for a very long time now?
I must go first.
Yes.
I mean, I mentioned some of it when I started. Like I said, when I started in politics in St. Vincent, it was one of the most challenging thing to do. There were questions about, do you not want to have a family first? I mean, how do you, in terms of like having kids, whoever told you I wanted to have? And what if I want to have? It's not your business, the timeline that I want to have it. Why are you watching my womb? And it was so absurd to me that nobody would ask Jamali when he's going to have his kids, I think we've seen the track record in St. Vincent where women are continuously bashed and debased and immoralized. Do you know, I was looking the other day in St. Vincent, even without running politics, about issues that affect women, things such as sexual assault and rape and so forth. And I realized that our ministry don't really run campaigns about rape, sexual assault, and stuff like that, because if we do that, we have to address the elephant in the room. They're just things that affect women time and time again that are unfortunate in the space in which we exist, that we have to contend with. We have seen, like I said, with Vinette was called all sorts of things unorthodox. She was rewarded money the other day. I don't think she's collected it yet. When K. Bacchus Batiste got in, people, what is she now? Batiste, Brown, this, I mean, what was that for? You know, there continues to be the degrading of women by our government ministers. That is unacceptable.
Is it only by government ministers or by the society, the Vincentian society?
Well, we have to talk about who sets the tone of the conversation, and the government tends to do that. So when you have a prime minister that will refer to somebody as a snotty-nosed gal, I mean, and people admire that person, what else would you expect the society to follow? Which is why I always say to redirect St. Vincent, we have to uproot those persons who are guiding us in the wrong direction, you know. And I think, is there room, and would I encourage more women to get involved? Absolutely, yes. I think that when there are more women at the table, women tend to get more done than men. In fact, if you look at our ministries and people who are in mid-level jobs, you will find that they're mostly occupied by women who continue to do the work, but the face of it is a man. If you look at who are the permanent secretaries, the mid-managers and so forth, in a lot of our ministries, it's really women. And then sometimes you're lucky if the minister goes into work, but when something good happens, it's his face that's there. I encourage more women to get involved, because I really want our electorate and our society to get to a level of political maturity where little girls can be looking up to us and say, I want that to be me one day. And unfortunately, if we continue along the road in which we're going, where we have scandalous people making it that political office is no longer an aspirational place to be, I mean, it may not happen. But I encourage people to continue to try.
Thank you, Lavon. And Maurice, what would you say about this?
Well, you asked us to identify impediments to women entering politics or being successful in the political arena in St. Vincent. And last year, I would have participated in, my apologies. Right. Last year, I would have participated in the U.S. Embassy's Women in Politics and Leadership Institute. And one of the things that we would have learned is a lot of it goes back to campaign financing and how money is allotted and whether we really are throwing our support behind our female candidates. And well, of course, we have our sexist, misogynistic type societies where we reinforce toxic masculine traits, and we also do our best to tear women down and to ensure that we reinforce these toxic traits in our men. So yeah, those are two of the main impediments that I think really affect women's ability to engage. I mean, the way I look at it is, if you're a woman and you want to be in politics, you have to be the Virgin Mary reincarnate or your Susie Homemaker extraordinaire, because you have to come out and you have to explain, okay, yes, I have 3 functioning children, and oh, I have a lovely household, or okay, well, I'm not interested in that stuff, and let's not have any sort of allusions to you being otherwise oriented, because then that's a problem as well. But I think it all goes back to the society, but I also don't want to place the blame at the foot of the politicians, because I feel like people aren't sheep, you know, you're able to form your own opinions. So I think it's just a matter of ensuring that we do our best to re-educate people in our society and to ensure that people understand tolerance and understand what it means to embrace feminist principles, to understand that gender equality is important, and we need to stop looking at women as less than or looking at women's bodies as things that we need to control. So that's what I think is one of the main issues here, the way that we look at women generally.
And understanding that this topic isn't limited to women, we'd like to hear also from Jamali and Jason. So Jason, what would you say on the issue of women in politics, especially young women in politics?
Yeah, I mean, I think as Maurice and Lavon have said, women do have a very significant role to play in politics. In fact, the research suggests that in those parliaments where women occupy senior political positions, the country tends to function a lot better insofar, especially as it relates to social protection and other related issues. So there is research that suggests that there's a correlation between women's participation in politics and developmental processes, particularly in the social protection arena. Women are, generally speaking, more concerned about the well-being of women and the society in general, especially on matters such as gender-based violence, among other things. I think that the political arena, as currently constructed, is not a safe space for women in politics. I was privy to a number of both online and offline discussions relative to the last political election, among other things. And what was particularly disheartening is how women were commented upon, how women's bodies were described, how women's degree of articulation was actually described. I think, as Marisa said, we are a very unkind society, particularly to people whom we do not consider fit into the traditional mold. So it can go both ways. For an outspoken young woman in particular, that person, generally speaking, is viewed as rude, as brutish, as somehow not fitting into the realm of what is the tradition. And so she has to now temper her approach to engaging with critical issues, whereas we have different standards for men. Men are able to behave in whatever way they feel like when they engage on particular issues, and we don't sanctimoniously condemn them when they do so. But a different set of standards apply for women. Similarly, women who may have had perhaps a checkered past don't stand to be successful, generally speaking, in our political arena, because things that are past matters are reaped up, and they're brought to the fore in the political climate, and they're thrown at them. And the truth is, many women would much prefer to not be associated with a process in which their human decency, in which their dignity, in which their sense of self is actually messed with. And so I think we need to do better in creating safe spaces for women, and not just, as we discussed earlier, a tokenistic way of treating with women, but women actually being the leaders insofar as decision making is concerned. I think far too often people are okay to say that, okay, we have the numbers, we have X number of women in our party, X number of women in our organization, but are women actually the decision makers? Are they actually making an impactful, or being allowed rather, to make an impactful contribution to their societies and their parties? And I really don't think that that space has been created for women to do so.
Jamali, what would you say?
Well, I mean, I know I would probably get backlash for saying this, but I'll say it anyway. I wish I had the stats at hand to back what I am going to say, but I believe that when we had the last election, I would not be surprised if the majority of voters who showed up on election day were women. It would be interesting for us to do some research on that, because I am sure in most countries, women show up to have their voice heard on election day. And if you have a situation in a country where women are free to vote, they may or may not make up the majority of voters, but you have, how many women we had in the last election? I think we had 5, and not one of them could win. We have to ask ourselves, do women support women? Do women see women as worthy of leadership, of holding the highest office, because we could stay here and we could throw the blame at toxic masculinity and men who whatever, but at the end of the day, why is it that the women who are voting don't elect their own? Something that we need to explore and discuss, because you would think that with the number of female voters that we have, it should be easy for a woman to win. I think it should be. But as I said before, number one, people talk about how women are degraded. Trust me, if we sit down and think about it, we take for granted how men are treated in the political arena in St. Vincent, and we have the examples before us. All manner of nasty things are said about our men all the time. So I don't know why is it that we're pretending as if women get the worst of it. Trust me, on a regular day. But you see, generally people don't care about men. You see, so when
is that true?
That's my opinion. I can't say this is my opinion. I have to say it's an opinion. I think, generally speaking, we are very sensitive to women issues and women's rights. But by and large, people don't really care about men. Whatever happened to men is whatever. Nobody really cares. And we see that in the way the society reacts. When something happens to a woman, there's outrage. But sometimes when the very same thing happens to a man, it's a joke. Right? So, I mean, we have to be, honest with ourselves. We have to be honest with ourselves. And I'm telling you, as a man, I don't feel safe going into politics, because I know, because even for men have wives, men have children, and we have seen not only men getting degraded, their wives sometimes are brought into the whole situation. And we have had that in recent times, where ministers' wives were brought down to the lowest when they themselves were not even guilty in the situation at all. So it's not a case to say, well, men have this free pass to just go in and live life. No, that's not true. So if I go into politics now, I have to be asking myself, are people going to be running on my wife? Are they going to be running on my children? Because as a man, you can't be happy. No man could be happy knowing that people have your wife as a target. It can't be comfortable for anybody. So, on a basic front, everybody wants to have our representatives. Everybody wants to say, yes, we have X amount of women in parliament, we have X amount of gays, and everybody wants to have a representative for their own whatever. So whether it's black or white or gay or women or whatever the case is, my thing is, let's just look at competence, because when you get to a place where you essentially require a quota for every characteristic or every whatever, you could end up in a situation where somebody is not allowed to fill a role that they are competent to fill, simply because the quota for their bracket has already been reached. And so that's not to say that I don't think that women can add value or have value to add, but all I'm saying is, if a woman, because we've had women in our parliament before, we've had women in politics who came in and made substantial contributions. We were mentioned here this evening, Renee Batiste, Gordon McGill. These are people who, they are women, they came in, they made a contribution, and I think that it is very much possible for women to come in and make a contribution, and I don't see them at any disadvantage, especially in circumstances where perhaps the majority of voters are women.
Sure. I said the final point on this.
I think I want to disagree to some extent with some of the things that Jamali said, because the truth is men do enjoy male privilege in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I do not believe any woman at all in St. Vincent who is married would survive having a sideman in politics in St. Vincent. There's a lot of things that really go unchecked as it relates to male privilege in our society and in politics. And one of the things you may say that there are more women voting, but you also have to look at party lines. So I think that that's a generalized statement that I don't know I want to agree with, particularly because even though overall there may be more women, as a matter of how the women are divided into various constituencies, I cannot say for sure whether that opinion substance, goes with it. It's unfortunate that we haven't had any women elected in the last general election, and we do have to see what we can do to turn that around. I think making women more viable by investing more in their campaigns, giving them more money, giving them more support, and so forth. But I do think that some of the things that men get away with in politics, a woman never would. So, for example, one of the topics that were trending the other day was when one of our ministers chose to maintain dignified silence. There were people on radio say, so I'm to a piece up. What if she take this? What if she take that? If this was a woman to this day, I don't think she would have been in politics today. So there's a level of male privilege that things that men should enjoy, certain bravado and certain socially acceptable things that come with men, that women just would never survive. And I do think that our politics is more hostile towards women than it is towards men. I'm not saying that there should be special provisions for women in terms of making a quota and so forth. I do think that if you think that you're capable of running, that you should run, and a political party should give you equal amount of spending, investment, and so forth to ensure that you have a notable campaign that people will want to vote for you. But I do think that we unfortunately we're not at that place yet.
All right, thank you, Lavon. And from all of our panelists, we've created a very safe space today for our young people to discuss politics and to say what can be done to help more young persons to enter the political arena in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And so far, we've heard about the mindsets of toxic masculinity, the mindsets of intolerance of different views, the conversations in the schools, and we also have to include the conversations in the home and the church. So my final question to our panelists is, do politicians shape the mindset of our society, or does the society shape or mold the politicians? And then you could always feel free to talk about the different institutions that are responsible for shaping the politicians, or how do the politicians go about shaping the society? Jason, let's hear from you.
Yeah, really interesting question. I mean, I'd say that on balance, I believe that in a small island society as ours, politicians tend to shape the narrative insofar as how issues are addressed in our society and what are the priorities in our society. So we have a society in which politicians are viewed in some ways as demigods. They wield considerable political prowess. They can make decisions which can instantly affect the lives of those in relation to whom they are, in relation to whom there is a connection. And so I believe, therefore, that politicians wield a mighty amount of power in terms of their relations with members of the society. And we see that. We see that around elections, and we see that even after elections in terms of the various discourses that are had. I would say, therefore, that it is incumbent upon politicians to set a better example for the society. If it is that you are entrusted with power, that power comes with a commensurate responsibility. And I really don't think that that responsibility is taken seriously. That responsibility is not taken seriously when it is that we, as politicians, are asked to account for how public monies are spent and no proper account can be given. It is not taken seriously when there is systematic and systemic victimization and nobody is held to account. It is not taken seriously when there is deliberate silencing of contending voices. And so, because our politicians in St. Vincent and the Grenadines have a particular, as you refer to it, as a bravado, this charisma, this way of doing things, that is very all or nothing, very top down in its approach, we see our society being shaped in that way. And so in St. Vincent now, I can't simply go into Kingston wearing a yellow shirt or a red shirt. In fact, I've been asked on multiple occasions, why is it that I'm wearing X shirt or Y shirt on a regular day? And that is because the politicians themselves have created a toxic culture in which you're either for or you are against. There is no middle ground. And so I very much hope for a mature society in which we demand more of our politicians, and which in a society in which our politicians really take seriously what it means constitutionally to be representatives of the people. It means service above self. Unless our politicians are mature enough to get to that place where they recognize that really important dichotomy, then there's no point. And our politics will continue to be shaped by these politicians. So I'm really hoping that in the next iteration of our political elections, we see a greater focus on policies and the legitimacy of those policies and the feasibility of these policies, rather than the bravado. Who can speak better? Who can sort of create this charismatic approach, which Vincentians seem to like very much?
And Maurice, what would you say?
I actually think it goes both ways. I think our society molds our politicians in that we, as Jason just said, we like the bravado, we like the charisma. So we reinforce that by selecting those that have exhibited sufficient bravado and sufficient charisma. And then they themselves, they in turn influence the conversation, because the idea is usually to retain power. So you simply say what is necessary and you continue along. There's no actual, and often people are resistant to change. And so as a politician, you may be hesitant to upset the apple cart, so to speak, because you need to retain power. You want to get back into office. And so I think it's just a cycle. And to agree with what Jason said, I really do hope that we can have change, but I don't think we can have change without societal change, because we have to remember that we are the ones who select those who govern us. And we would select based on what we consider to be important. And we may not at this time be looking at, are they aligned with my views, or are they interested in what I'm interested in? You know, are they working for climate change? Are they working for women's rights? Or is it that, I got some lumber and some galvanized last year and it was nice, you know, and they seem okay. They're well liked, they're popular. I think I'll just, put my X there. So I think a lot of it goes back to our society.
To jump in right here.
Well, I think the problem that we have, I don't think that politicians and the wider society is on an equal footing. So I think the politicians have an upper hand in terms of shaping things. And I think that is primarily when you consider the economic realities of St. Vincent. It's a poor country. I think most Vincentians are poor. Mm-hmm. And they are really just, they see politicians as, a lot of people see politicians as their only solution, their only way out. So for housing, for education, for business, for jobs, for scholarships, for everything that you could think about, they see politicians as the ones who they have to please in order to get by in life. And if you don't essentially massage their ego, then you won't get the benefits that come from having that relationship with politicians. And so one of the things that we have to change is empowering people generally from an economic standpoint, because I think the more secure and independent you are economically, you are in a better position really to demand more and to demand better. But when you are vulnerable and dependent, you're really in a bad place. You really have to take what you get, really. And so young people in particular have to ensure that they set up themselves in that way, whether through independent employment or whatever the case is, because I think that is what is going to make a very, very big difference in the way we relate to each other.
Thank you. Navon?
Before I go on, I did see a correction to something that I said earlier. Somebody on the live named Trudy said, I think I'd spoken about the need for gender-based violence campaigns and so forth from the Ministry of Gender Affairs. And I don't know if she works there, but she said that they do have some of those campaigns with NGOs, and I love to hold myself accountable to. So if you do what then they do, then that's good, but they're perhaps not loud enough because I'm not aware of any of them. But if they do, then that's good. I'm just not aware, and I don't know how many persons are aware of it.
Understood.
But to the question about society and the way that we view politicians, the truth is, it is very easy for people who get into office, especially over a long period of time, to become corrupt, to become intoxicated with authority. And that is why we don't leave politicians to themselves. And I say that to say that we've been asking for integrity legislation. We've been asking, and one of the things that I think we need is like independent electoral commissions. We need better systems of accountability in place. You can't leave it to people to always do the right thing. We hope that they do, but unfortunately, they do not. And we have to look at the way in which it is easy for people to perceive that we don't have free and fair justice systems. You have to look at the way in which a lot of the things that happen in our country unfolds, and that's because we do not have strong systems that are independent of the government to hold the government accountable for their actions. And I think that whenever we have things like integrity legislation in place, whenever we have stronger systems that help to question actions by the government, then I think that that's when we begin to hold government more accountable. It's saddening to me that when you have questions like, for example, about spending in the tourism authority that receives money from taxpayers, that the head of it will say that's not people's business. And when you ask about questions about like $95 million that is unaccounted for, and we just don't get any real questions, any real answers rather, from those in authority. It's sad. We hope that people will be decent, but they aren't always are. And that's why we need better legislation to support and to force the behavior that we want by people in public office. And it is also why I encourage people to get involved in politics. And there's a misconception that getting involved means joining a political party. And it really isn't. You can simply get involved by having a podcast, joining with some friends, do a live stream, talk about the things that you see are right and wrong, whether it is wrong by the NDP or wrong by the ULP. And I don't think that the NDP is beyond being called out. Similarly, I don't think that the government is beyond being called out. But what happens when young people bond together and decide to talk about things, that is when we get to the point of holding our leaders accountable. But if we deal with it with a hands-off approach, let me just try work, get my money, and I'm all right in my corner. The truth is, whatever politicians do in office, it affects our bottom line as well. It depends. It will affect whether or not I spend $5 on a bread or I spend $4. And so we have to not be hands-off as a people when it comes on to accountability, transparency, and good behavior in public office.
All right, thank you, Lavon. And as we wrap up and we leave the audience, as young people with such opinions and so much to give, so much value to give to the Vincentian public, with an emphasis on love for country, love for country over party. In 1 minute, what advice would you give to young persons who are hoping to get involved in actual partisan politics in St. Vincent and the Grenadines? And Lavon, I'll start with you. In 1 minute.
Well, if you're hoping to get involved in politics in St. Vincent, I'd encourage you to get involved in organizations that help you to develop your soft skills. I think that it is very important for that to happen, because the truth is, when you enter into politics, it's a heavy thing to shoulder, it's a heavy burden to carry, especially if you're going into representative politics. I think the smallest constituency, you probably have maybe 5,000 people to have to answer to. That's 5,000 people, probably on an average in a given month, maybe 500 people going to come to you to ask for something. You're going to be stressed. You're going to not always be able to help them. You're going to always want to help, I hope, and you can't. And so you have to somehow prepare yourself with a level of mental fortitude that prepares you to deal with that day to day in and out of people's needs. Because the truth is,
we're coming very close to the end of that.
Yeah, I'm wrapping it up. The truth is, you have no days off when you enter into representative politics. And the only way you can be prepared for that is by being a part of groups that Jamali are part of in church, being part of a youth parliament, being part of a national youth council, being a member of your political party organization. Those are the things that will help to adequately prepare you and ground you for ultimately transitioning.
Thank you, Jamali.
For my advice for young people, if you want to get involved in politics, the most important question that you have to answer is why. Why do you want to get involved? Because I think the reason you get involved is going to ultimately determine what kind of leader you're going to be. And so are you going to get involved simply because you see it as an opportunity to get rich? Are you going to get involved because you just want to be able to say, I'm in charge, or I call the shots, or whatever? People have different motivations, and your motive is very, very important. And so you have to go into this thing with good intention, with pure motive, and your motive has to be because you want to improve the quality of life.
There's a few seconds left.
That Vincentians have, right? So I think the why is important, and if I could just slip this in
10 seconds.
In 10 seconds, sometimes people approach you to get involved, and I think sometimes politicians approach young people because they see them as being influential, and they want to use your influence for their own advantage.
Their
and so
agenda.
Don't allow anybody to approach you because they figure you are influential. And influential, of course, does not mean competence. Influential and competence is two very different things. Right?
Thank you. That's about 20 seconds. Jason, what would you say? What's your advice to young persons with an emphasis on love for country, as Jamali reiterated?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I would endorse the view that Jamali expressed a short while ago, that most certainly you have to understand what your purpose is. Why are you doing this? Because I think, as he mentioned, ultimately you're accountable to the people, and constitutionally you are required to act in the best interest of your constituents. And so if it is not your objective to act in the best interest of your constituents, then I think that you have no purpose in politics. And I think that is fundamentally it. I think secondly also, it is for us to recognize as young persons that the race is not for the swift. I think it's so easy to become enamored by everything that perhaps isn't going right at this time. And so we are a generation that looks for quick fixes. We're a generation that looks for instant gratification and instant success. And many people don't focus on the process. My emphasis would be on the process, trying to make sure that you are the best version of yourself so that you can give to your populace the very best version of yourself. It's similar to a marriage. So invariably, if you are seeking to get married, you want to be the very best version of yourself. So you prepare yourself adequately, and invariably thereafter, you become the best person for your spouse. So similarly, in the context of electoral politics, if you're considering it actively, try to become the best version of yourself. Try to be committed, try to be focused, disciplined, and all of those basic tenets which we've discussed earlier in our conversation.
Jason and Maurice, what would you say to young persons?
I would advise them to, as everyone has said, find a cause. And if you can't find a cause, there's a list of SDGs available on the UN's website. You can find a cause there. You find a cause, you join an NGO, and then you work on yourself and you work on your cause. And that way you'll ensure that you are prepared and that you do have some purpose in entering the arena.
You definitely were the only person to stick to your 1 minute. So thank you once more, panelists. It was a wonderful discussion. Thank you to the audience for listening and for also giving your take online. We are following your comments. And we will be back next week, Sunday. Don't forget to get your fruits from Role Model, Downstairs Court. And we are here coming to you live from Computech Conference Room. Thank you to our sponsors. Thank you. Have a wonderful week. See you next week.
Drive for free, talk for free with Hyrule. You can win it all.
That's right. Free beer, free rent, free utilities, groceries, and fuel.
Check the bar for your 3 for $10. Look under your crown and win. Everything is rent, free. Utilities, groceries, fuel. You can win it all. Yeah.
Enjoy Ice Cold Hyrule 3 for $10 and check under the crown for the Live Up stamp and win a $200 cash voucher instantly.
Hyrule, you can win. Everything is free.
There's over $100,000 in prizes to be won. Rise up S3G and win with Hyrule. Terms and conditions apply. Promotion ends August 15th. Must mean 18 and older. Please drink responsibly.
Computech Limited is one of the oldest computer businesses in SVG. Computech supplies a wide range of desktop and laptop computers and printers to suit your home or business, and is the only company that provides a full range of IT solutions to our many customers across St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Computech, your authorized service center for Dell, HP, and Lenovo. Ideally located in Kingstown on the corner of Egmont and Bay Street, opposite the Financial Complex building. Remember the name. Computech, 25 years and getting better.
Super Bingo. Bingo tickets play for opportunity to win US $25,000 on Sunday, 29th August 2021. Beginning at 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. 13 chances to win. 6 US $1,000 cash prizes. 4 $2,000 US cash prizes. 3,000 US cash prizes. And 1 $5,000 US cash prize. Games will be played on www.bingomaker.com. Login and access information would be provided upon purchase. Proceeds from this event goes towards a worthy cause. August 29th, El Dorado Super Bingo.